to introduce each of them, and then seriatim, they'll, in this order, be our teachers for about 15 minutes each. So we'll, after that, have some conversation, some dialogue back and forth. So first is Reverend Cameron Trimble, founder and CEO of Convergence. Reverend Trimble describes herself as a serial entrepreneur committed to the triple bottom line, concern for people, profit, and the planet. Driven by an adventurous spirit, she co-founded and serves as the CEO of Convergence, which is an international church consultancy. She serves as a senior consultant and also is a pilot and an author. Cameron is particularly focused on human transformation and leadership. She believes that diversity is the source of lasting innovation and the driver of fair profit. Cameron has also enjoyed a career as an ordained pastor in the United Church of Christ, serving as the pastor of 4 congregations in the Atlanta area. Hers has been an eclectic career path. She says she learns many of her leadership lessons through the adventures of the cockpit of her airplane. She's here to help us learn to take flight despite and after COVID. Our second presenter is going to be Reverend Michael Livingston, the interim senior minister of the Riverside Church in New York City. Working in congregational ministry has been close to Michael's heart at the beginning of his career in Los Angeles and currently at Riverside. Besides congregational ministry, Michael has worked with interfaith worker justice in Washington, D.C., advocating for underpaid workers. He served in executive leadership positions doing deep ecumenical and interfaith engagement with the International Council of Community Churches and also with the National Council of Churches. He served as president of the National Council of Churches from 2006 to 2007. Michael also spent 14 years in graduate theological education at Princeton Theological Seminary. Michael believes that congregations and people of faith can make a difference as incubators for a radical love that grows strong, seeking peace through justice. And finally, Reverend Jim Keat is the Associate Minister of Digital Strategy and Online Engagement at the Riverside Church, where he works with Michael Livingston. Jim is also the Director of Online Innovation at the Convergence Network, where he works with Cameron. So we have a kind of a collective group here, I think, of people who know each other and work collaboratively with each other, and we'll get the variety of perspectives. Jim is the producer of original media projects from the Riverside Church. Previously, Jim served as the Associate Minister of Education at Middle Collegiate Church. He was a product designer at Sparkhouse Augsburg Fortress, and was middle school program and content pastor at Mars Hill Bible Church. Jim is a divergent thinker, an ideation specialist, and an aspiring minimalist. In his spare time, he enjoys solving Rubik's Cube, going on a long run, cooking dinner, he's got it there, playing board games and editing videos. Also, if you have time, take a look at his adventures in camping videos in his Airstream with his family. So with that, Cameron, if you'd take it away, please.
Right. Well, what a delight to be with this motley crew that is on your screen that we're all highlighted. I'm particularly delighted to get to create mischief with Michael, who we don't get to work together very much, but with Jim, who we get to work together all the time. So this is a real honor, and thank you for your all's time. I've got 15 minutes, and there's a whole lot that I'd love to put into our imaginations and wonder about together. I'm wondering if the biggest contribution I could make is actually to start with a really bad aviation metaphor, but as a pilot, I feel quite obligated, and to say that I might start our conversation at the 60,000 foot perspective. Most of my experience in working with congregations across the United States, Canada, and some in the UK has been that the vast majority of our congregational leadership is tending to approach the opportunities of the age in which we're living as problems to be fixed rather than conditions to be treated when needed, or amplified when that's called for as well. So when I'm working with a lot of congregational leaders, and maybe you're having the same experience, I see leaders who have kind of three postures. One is, we don't need to change. Let's just keep doing what we're doing. We'll get through this moment. So bury your head in the sand. The second posture might be, we should make some minor tweaks, but ultimately our congregation is doing what it needs to do. Let's just continue to hold course. And then the third one is this pandemic reality and the ways in which it is undoing us and redoing us is the moment we've been waiting our whole lives for. This is the most extraordinary opportunity that we have ever faced. And I am among them, as those kinds of leaders. But what I also see happening in our congregations is looking for false saviors, if you will. So I see congregational leaders hoping silently, or not silently, but quietly whispering that they're waiting for denominations in our national systems or regional systems to save us. They're saying, well, God will save us, which is great, but hard to know your next best step. Or they're saying, well, I'm just not going to worry about this because I'm going to retire soon. And so we're seeing a lot of that. And before COVID, we were seeing all of those dynamics. And I saw a lot of people retired in place, which really got on my nerves. But now in the midst of the Great Resignation, I think we're seeing unprecedented opportunity. But what I really want to highlight is that we're, I believe, going through a seismic change, something that is truly extraordinary for our time. And I'm going to just pop up a quick screen here for us. Can I just get someone to confirm that you can see? Thumbs up, great. So the opportunity of this moment is that we are living, in the words of Jean Houston, a unique moment in human evolution, where you and I are living in our lifespans, the life experience that is 10 to 100 times greater than the life experiences of our ancestors, even 2 or 3 generations ago. The ways in which technology is connecting us now and is fundamentally shifting how we connect to one another, how we understand what it means to contribute to society, how we understand how to organize society. All of these things are being widely changed, called into question, invited for expansion. And so it's creating a new condition, a conditional reality in which you and I get to live, move, have our being, and be creative contributors to this moment. It's absolutely understandable to want to kind of go back into the trenches, to hold course, to want to be protective of what we've built over generations, because we're living in what in this moment might feel like moment of breakdown. We are, I think, living through certainly the decline of institutional religion, so religion let down, racial throwdown, technological showdown, economic meltdown, climate breakdown, democracy, or climate countdown and democracy breakdown. So everywhere we look, it seems like the institutions that organize human life are undergoing seismic shifts. That matters because if we want to understand and orient ourselves to what's happening in the religious landscape, we can't do that outside of understanding what's happening across the whole global landscape, across all of creation, to understand the shifts in which we're living. So it isn't as if our institutions are failing uniquely or changing uniquely. It is a much bigger shift in how institutions function in our culture is happening right before our very eyes. And I believe that is because, in part, we have a shifting collective story. Now, why does that matter when you all want to talk about congregations and what's going on in congregations? At least that was my requested topic to speak on, because I believe fundamentally the most singular, most important thing that we can do as theologians, as wisdom bearers in culture, is to attend to the collective story, the sacred psychology, the theology that we're that shapes our values, our beliefs, our economics, our politics, and our understanding of our own self-identity, where we fit into the picture. I think that what's happening for us right now in religious space, in congregational life, is that the story we tell ourselves about what it means to be human in relationship with each other and in relationship with God has never before in history needed to embrace the level of diversity that globalization has now invited for us. So never before have you and I been able to connect this way at this real time from all these different places, but also across the world. And so that is creating some disruptions in how we live and move and have our beings together. And it's requiring some new understandings of what of the collective story that we all share. You need not look any further, actually, between competing stories than what we see on Netflix with Squid Game. And the fact that Squid Game almost overnight takes over Netflix as the #1 viewed show, which is a terribly violent dystopian narrative we should all be deeply concerned about. But it takes the collective imagination, takes over a collective or contributes to a collective story that is happening all across the world. Now, here's, so if I was to give it some inclination about how COVID is shifting us and what we need to pay attention to. Fundamentally, I think every congregation needs to be tuned into that we need a new collective story, that ultimately that's what we're doing, is rescripting what it means to be human community. Where is God? How is God revealing God's vision for beloved community in our midst? I don't have time to go into this, so I'll go back to that. But I want to stress, and Jim Keat will go into this, that hybrid is the new normal. That it used to be that the question was, why would we host this online when we could be in person? But now it's reversed, of course. Why would we be in person when we could host this online? Which is a huge shift. And I think we're incredibly well positioned, actually, as a movement to jump into that. I think Judaism, in particular, of all of the faith traditions, has so much to teach the rest of the world, rest of the faiths, about this particular moment and how to navigate a compelling future, because what has been built into the core of the Jewish experience are the daily rituals of life that keep the faith embodied in us 24/7. Whereas in many of the other traditions, we've abdicated that and lost our way in the practice of faith beyond what we might dedicate as a 1 hour on a Sunday morning. So I think there's an incredible opportunity when we begin to see what congregations will look like going forward. Congregational attendance is going to be forever changed, and we should just go ahead and normalize that. Most of the interviews, we do hundreds of interviews with participants and congregations right now, and the vast majority of people are saying that I've repatterned my life and that if I can join online, I might as well. And I shouldn't say the vast majority, but a significant percentage that is going to accelerate what was already true for us. Faith Communities Today just released a 20-year survey of congregations. And what they found is that the course of 20 years, and these were particularly Christians, let me clarify that, but I think it would hold true across our tribes, that in just 20 years, we declined from an average attendance of 137 people down to 65 as the average of congregations in the United States. Now, again, that was before COVID, so we can expect that is only going to continue to accelerate. So our congregations will get smaller in one way, and then I think potentially have expansive capacities in other ways, as long as we lean into that hybrid reality. Again, I'm going to have to fast forward through some of these because of time. My fourth suggestion is that we overcome a poverty of imagination, to remember that every sector of human culture is going through this transformation, and that we have the capacity to dream of what is our probable future and then what is our desirable future, and to become the architects of the kind of faith communities, the kind of experience that we would like to. So rather than being victims of this movement, I would invite us all to be creative contributors. I also want to suggest to congregational leaders that we must partner or die, that the congregations who are vibrant in the future will understand the power of global collaborative or local collaborative partnerships. A useful framework, I think, for mission is the UN Sustainable Development Goals. in a way of building partnerships across many sectors for making the world a better place there. Then I finally want to just say that financial sustainability remains a really dynamic question. The most vulnerable of our congregations are those around the size of, or between about 200 to 600 in membership. Those congregations were already stressed before this pandemic hit, but now because of the pandemic, the vast majority of these congregations did not have 3 months of cash reserve in them. So they were supported by the PPP loans that were given out, but now are starting to feel the stress of being overstaffed and under-resourced, and now moving through their endowments at a significant percentage. And then also dealing with aging congregational buildings. So we're seeing actually the most innovation in that space, but then also the most risk, which we'll remember, of course, that risk is often the greatest motivator for our greatest innovations. So that may very well be a very good thing. So here are some stats on giving that we won't go through again to save time. And this is the final slide I want to leave you with, that this is what I hope to see as our movement on the horizon, which I think there's a good case. Hubs of congregational vitality, regional, multi-ethnical, ecumenical cohorts and teams, leaders becoming moral leaders in the public square, so public theologians, joint projects, ethical spectacles, I can explain that if you're interested, joint celebrations, the reintroduction, rebranding of faith, and the facilitating a multi-faith collaboration. So I've told you more than I know in about 5 seconds. This is normally at least an hour and a half of conversation, but I want to just whet your appetite, and I will hand it to Michael.
Thank you, Cameron. I think I've unmuted myself. Have I successfully? Yeah. Yes?
I have.
All right. Well, I think I want to begin by just celebrating. I didn't know what I'd see when I came on here, but I see friends from earlier periods in my life, Steve Gutau, Catherine Laurie, Peter McCarry, Donnie Anderson, David Saperstein. It's wonderful to see you all and to meet some of you for the first time. I also want to thank Jeffrey Wohlberg for that text presentation at the beginning. Very rich, and it reminded me, we had at Riverside about this time last year, Amy Jill Levine preached for us on Sunday morning. And one of the things she said in a dialogue that took place afterwards was, as Easter was coming a month or two away, and she said, imagine me sitting in the back of your sanctuary as you preach your Easter sermon. And just, I think, stressing the very thing that you're talking about here, the way our traditions claim, and certainly the Jewish tradition, the Torah is at the heart of that tradition, but the way we claim this tradition, Christians appropriate it as well, and yet have these very different understandings of what some of the meaning of it is. And that's a rich dialogue that I celebrate your have whenever you gather in this setting. So let me then begin to just make a few points. I love being sandwiched between Cameron Trimble and Jim Keat. When Tony asked me to do this, I thought immediately of asking Jim on our staff as digital minister to join me in this without knowing that Cameron would be here. And now I'm getting it from both ends, because I'm probably in one of Cameron's slides as somewhere I'm floating toward retirement, not fully equipped as younger folks are to take advantage of some of the technological changes that are taking place. So you're just going to have to listen to me talk and not see any fancy slides here. So will they come back? And what do we have to offer in this divided world that will make folks want to come back? Well, the first thing I want to say is they never left. And we often say, especially in the Protestant tradition, church isn't the building, it's the people. And now, right now, under the pressures that we're facing, is the time that we're testing this principle as perhaps never before. whether in a Gothic cathedral like Riverside or a storefront, we're all being forced to deal with this ecclesial reality. I think I want to say too, I preach annually at the congregation of a friend of mine. He was a seminary classmate. We lived across the hall from one another, and I almost every year since, this is 45 years now, I've been to his church. They never stopped meeting together, never, throughout the whole pandemic. They've been meeting in person, and they never left the building. And I think that's a reality that's out there. I don't advise it. I was astounded when I learned this from him. But some have never left. And in a real sense, this profound ecclesial question of what is the church is before us in this moment. What are we? What are we made of? Where's the center of our life as a people of God to be found? From tents and the Jewish heritage to brick and mortar buildings, what really matters? And we know it's people. We know it's relationships. We know it's community where we encounter the spirit of a living God. So we gathered once the pandemic hit, and we knew March of 2020 that we were going to have to do things differently. I think it was a matter of curiosity and a sense that this wouldn't be happening long. I had a flight to Los Angeles in March, late March, which I changed, and I changed it to May, thinking in 2 or 3 months I'll be able to take this trip, visit my aging parents. But it was kind of a curiosity. So we're going to have to do this differently. Let's worship online. Let's do this hybrid, well, not a hybrid then, it was exclusively online. We had the great advantage, and perhaps Jim will talk about some of this, but we were already doing live stream of our worship services. We've been doing it for quite some time. So the shift was simple for us. It was easy, and we're even better at it now than when we began. But for most of us, it was a curiosity. There were folks who were participating in our worship virtually, but for most of us, it was, all right, let's try this out. Let's see how it works. But that curiosity very quickly became need as the weeks became months. And as we now enter a third year and don't know where this is going, will there be another variant after Omicron? Need has everything to do with the kind of community that we're trying to build now. And many of us in New York City are in apartments. We're alone, or there are couples. We're separated from family and friends. We're elderly. And the normal sustaining routines are just gone. So that curiosity in the beginning is now a need, a profound need for connection and being the church outside the building, where we have really no choice in it. We've had this brief moment of back worshiping in person in, I think, September. We came back, and that's gone again. Then I want to raise the question of context, because it was framed around COVID. Are we going to come back after COVID? But it's so much more complex than that. And Cameron, on one of those really beautiful slides illustrated this. It's not just COVID now. That's not just the context that we're dealing with. It's political threats. It's chaos. It's the very tenuous nature of our democracy itself. The challenges to voting rights that we're seeing in more than half of our states. It's the January 6th insurrection. It's this enormous challenge to our national unity called Donald Trump. It's unmasked hate. We're seeing this. I think someone talked about having been engaged just this morning in Texas, in Austin, with the aftermath of the horrific incident there that, thank God, didn't end in death. But there's Tree of Life out there in the background of what's just happened. There is Mother Emanuel there. That's a part of this context that's driving the forces that we have to deal with, whether in the building or out of the building. It's the looming fact of the destruction of our planet. And that's not just an elephant in the room, it's a herd of elephants destroying the very house itself. And we're in that herd. And so the question is real. Can we get through this? And how do we get through this? And what does coming back mean? And I know Jim will be talking about this in his presentation, but we need a strategy to deal with this radically altered reality. And we have to engage these questions, or we simply have no relevance to the people, our people, who need church, who need synagogue, who need mosque. If we aren't seen as engaging these questions, these challenges, this context in the environment of our having been uprooted from our patterns, then why would they even want to come back? We have to be addressing the urgency of the needs that our people feel. We have to be coming to grips with what is happening in our communities and our nation, or all will be lost. So I want to talk for a few minutes about what we've done at Riverside and how we're engaging in this period. Obviously, we've continued with Sunday morning worship, and it's now hybrid. Our leadership team is present in the building, our choirs, our liturgist, our preacher, and we hope to get back in the building soon, but that's going to be with diminished numbers. But we've embraced this period now and the changes we've had to make. I would say, even welcomed it now. And we've added on Sunday mornings, not just the worship service, which is obviously live streamed and in person when that's possible. Perhaps the end of February, we'll be back in the building again. But the balance has shifted and more people will be online. More people have been online than are in the building since this has begun. But we added a feature that has really helped to bring real substance to Sunday morning. We have a virtual coffee hour now. We had coffee hour before, and people would stand around in the fellowship hall in their cliques, talking to the same people week after week after week. But we have a virtual coffee hour now, during which the congregants engage the speaker of the morning, the preacher of the morning. And we have between 60 and 100 people who stay on after the worship service to engage in this dialogue. And I think it's an expression of this need to be connected, to continue to be the church, to not let go of one another, but to stay connected and to deepen the meaning of our belonging together. Small groups, seminars, adult education on relevant topics, all of this has taken on even heightened importance and larger numbers. And I can't overestimate how important this has been in the whole matter of people staying connected and coming back and being a part of the community. We've talked about anti-racism. This past Sunday, we were engaged in interrogating our own history. We had Gary Dorian, the Union Theological Seminary and Columbia University professor. He's an expert on so many things, but one of them is Riverside itself and Harry Emerson Fosdick. And we took a deep dive into that part of our identity. But these small groups, these adult education, this virtual coffee hour, these things they're becoming, in a sense, a kind of anchor for the life of our community. And they're keeping people connected. And not just our people, not just members, but we have people from other states who are regular participants in this. We have people from other countries who participate in this with some real regularity now. We have morning prayer now daily. We didn't have that before, but it's broader and deeper now than it's ever been, and it's addressing a need that people have to hear one another's concerns and hold one another up in prayer. We have a midweek online experience we call Grace Notes. It's text, it's conversation, it's song, it's prayer, deeply meaningful. We get from 20 to 35 people who will show up for this relentlessly every Wednesday night. We've begun, and much more seriously now than before, prayer and fasting. It's kind of seasonal, and Lent and Advent. We're preparing for Lent now, but Fridays throughout a season, we'll gather at sunrise to start a day with prayer and then fast for the day. It's been very meaningful to deepening the community, the life of the community that we've been experiencing. Music, concerts, organ, carillon, choirs. Much of this is going to be virtual in this coming year, but we've decided to keep doing what we've been doing and not to let things go, to add new things, to alter some things so that they fit the hybrid nature of our being together these days. So we're adapting, but we're trying to have as full an expression of congregational life as is possible. And just to end with something mundane, like the business of the church has to go on. The governing council has to meet, the commissions, the committees. All of this is continuing to happen. I think it's happening now with even greater efficiency and effectiveness because it's online. Attendance is better. We're not spending time commuting. We're not spending gas commuting. We're not having the same kinds of wear and tear on our bodies. We're not having meals together that can get expensive. But all of the work is still going on. It's just going on online and very effectively, I would say. It's good for the planet. It's good for us individually, and the work of the church, the business of the church is attended to with every bit of the same kind of energy and attentiveness that happened before COVID. And I'm right where Cameron was. This is an enormous opportunity for revitalization. It's an enormous opportunity to stop and to take seriously all of the forces that are impinging upon the way we've been church, the way we've been synagogue in the past, as we face a very different reality, a very different future, the threats to the planet, the unmasking of the systemic racism that's never gone away, but has always been a part of it, but is now much more prominent. Everybody seems to be waking up to what is going on, even if that means that we're looking at this very divided America. We need to look at this divided America. We need to seize the opportunity that this moment presents to be the church, to be the people of God, ready to face the future that's awaiting us. So I think I'll stop there and look forward to hearing from Jim and conversation afterwards.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Cameron. As has been said, wonderful to be here with you all. I have heard wonderful things of the National Council of Churches and both organizations in many contexts, but this is my first time getting to sit among you in any capacity. So thank you for making the space and welcoming me as well. As Michael mentioned, my role at Riverside is the digital minister. And believe it or not, I started functioning in that role in 2019. I've been one of Riverside's clergy, one of our pastors, since about 2016, 2017, when I joined the staff, always working with our digital content and our communications team. But in 2019, I left the city. My wife and I began traveling. That's where those Airstream videos that were mentioned in my bio came up. And I began working remotely. 2019, this is a year before working from home was the cool thing to do. and I was Riverside's digital minister, being intentional about creating online content and cultivating our online community. And when I began this experiment, I had many colleagues, many congregants, no doubt, who were scratching their heads going, what's a digital minister? And just a year later, as the pandemic became our ongoing reality, the response quickly came, oh, thank God we have a digital minister, which sometimes just meant Zoom tech support. But hey, whatever the people need, right? That's what being a faith leader and a pastor and clergy is. So I come to this conversation now serving as Riverside's digital minister and as with Convergence as the director of online innovation. And really those two hats at Riverside, I get to play with these toys and experiment in how do we help our communities, our congregations try these online things out, virtual coffee hour, for example, like Michael said. But then with Convergence, I really get to help resource other communities to try it as well. I like to play with the toys, but I also like to give them away so we can all play together. Now, for the brief time I'll get to share with you a bit before we have more of a dialogue, I think our question that frames this, will they come back, is an interesting one. As Cameron and Michael have both said or alluded to, kind of, probably not in the way they used to. That's always been kind of the reality with every shift in society that we've seen. But perhaps we need to shift the question slightly. Rather than will they come back, we need to ask, will we go to them? Which again is not a new question. That's a question that faith communities have always been asking. We're not a building, we're a people. So we go to where the people are. These past 2 years have made it abundantly clear that an essential aspect of the way that we go to them, it must include understanding ourselves as a community of faith through online spaces and digital content. Going to them means more than just going to the local coffee shop or the local bar or the local bookstore. Going to them means being where the people are. If any of you are hearing The Little Mermaid in your heads, that's appropriate. I want to be where the people are. That's a theology that formed me as a child. And then as a Christian minister, I learned it in the words of Jesus with this incarnational presence of being where the people are. That's what we've always been called to do as people of faith. And now in this moment, the question continues to be, well, where are the people? And we've continued to see more and more in our emerging world and in this pandemic reality that the people are online. We're in these digital spaces. Now, this is where it gets interesting because, at least in my experience, maybe you have different ones, and if so, you are lucky. Liberal religious communities tend to have, I would say, really great and rich and robust theology. But then we have really bad websites and online presences, which makes sense. We prioritize meeting the needs of the people around us, making sure they have clothes on their back and food to eat over the expenses of designing a website and maintaining it. But I like to think you can have both. Can you have good theology and a good website? I hope so. I want to think so. I think we need to take that seriously in our current and our emerging world. Because the internet, it's redefined and it continues to redefine how we connect with one another. This meeting right now is an example of that, a technology that I'm guessing 2 years ago, many of you didn't even know existed. You probably thought the word Zoom was just an expression you made when you ran really fast, not a thing you would be using 3 times a day. But let's even go back further than Zoom. 1970 is when email was first invented. Email, a thing that feels like it's essential to our lives, whether we love it or hate it. We probably all hate it. It was first invented in 1970. It was a part of the original construct of the internet, which was at that time known as the ARPANET. And it was designed essentially for scientists to share documents that they were working on, their research documents. But by 1972, just 2 years after the invention of email, 75% of traffic on the internet, this worldwide server that was designed for file sharing amongst the professional scientists, scientific community, 75% of the traffic on this internet was used for email. Less than 2 years after the invention of it, it made up 75% of the internet. BBC did a report back in the 70s about this, and they said that the largest single surprise of this ARPANET, the internet, has been the incredible popularity and success of network mail. But I don't think it should have been a surprise at all, because the desire to socially network, it not only drives innovations, it co-ops them. Zoom was not invented for church or faith communities of any kind. It was designed for business meetings, yet we've co-opted it for authentic and real connection. Because here I don't have slides, but I have props. Maybe you've seen these things in the world. We're ready for this world. Oh, did I get blurry? There we go. Focus, camera. We're ready for this world of virtual reality. And we also often think that virtual is the opposite of real. Well, it's not. Virtual is not the opposite of real. Maybe sometimes the things you put in your Oculus might seem like it, but these virtual connections, virtual is not the opposite of real. Virtual is the opposite of physical. They are both real. When someone comes to your physical space, when someone comes to your virtual space, those are both real spaces and real encounters. So as we look at the current moment we're living in and the moments inevitably to come throughout this pandemic and post-pandemic reality, these virtual components are essential, but they're not secondary. They're not less than. They are a real experience. The kinds of things people share in these online spaces are real experiences and things to share. I remember when I was a pastor at Middle Collegiate Church for a few years in the East Village in New York, I had given up Facebook. I was tired of it. I'm still tired of it. And I deleted my account, stopped using it. And then I noticed some congregants were saying, oh, I'm so glad that you were all praying for me this week. And I was like, how did we know that we were praying for you? Oh, I posted it on my Facebook page and some other congregants commented that they were praying for me. And I began to realize I wasn't showing up where my congregants are. They were offering who they were in these spaces, but I wasn't there with them. Those are real spaces. We need to be in those spaces with them. And we need to remember that those virtual spaces are still very real and meaningful. Now, as we've been through these past 2 years, chances are you probably didn't go to school to be a media producer. Maybe you did. Great. Glad this is your moment. Most of us didn't. I didn't. I studied theology and youth ministry. But now this is the world we find ourselves in, where we're all producing online content and services and editing things that on our iPads and phones and devices. When it comes to creating and producing this online content, here's prop number 2. I like to think of it as a digital campfire. We can spend a lot of time focused on the thing we're making, the video we're editing, the podcast we're producing, the graphic we're designing, the hybrid service we're creating. But we need to remember that I think all of this stuff is a digital campfire. And the purpose in my mind of a campfire is to exist, but it's to draw people to it so they can have a connection with one another. All of the things we are creating in these online spaces, these hybrid spaces, they always exist to connect people with people, and that is essential. These online things, just like email was in the invention of the internet, we co-opt it for our social networking. That social connection is essential to what we're doing in these spaces. Now, as we continue to find ourselves creating content in these online spaces, yes, you should aspire to make it the best it can be. But again, remember, it exists for the connection of the people who it's serving. Now, here's what I would like to remember too. One more prop. These are my 1.5-year-old son's building blocks. The only way to get from A to Z is one letter at a time. You might see someone else's online service, the video they made, and think, oh, that's so good. I wish I could make something like that. Chances are they had a bit of practice leading up to that moment. And what I am grateful for is that these past 2 years have given all of us so much practice and skills we likely didn't even know we had. But don't stop. You're going to get better every time you make a new thing, and you might start where you are. I remember once going back to listen to one of my favorite podcasts' first episodes. It's called Radio Lab. I found their very first episode. It was good, But I was like, oh, this isn't nearly as good as their new stuff, because everyone has to start somewhere. And the point is to keep going as we do this work together, because we're called to do this work for the people in our parishes and the people in our, online parishes in all these spaces around us. Now, I want to end my fire hose of rambling with three hopefully practical things to keep in mind as we go to them. We consider on waiting for them to come to us. That's been a thing that churches and synagogues and faith communities have been doing, I think, since we've existed. But we can also, as we've also done in our entire existence, be intentional about going to them. And in these online spaces, here are three hopefully practical ways to do that. Number one, don't do all the things. There are always new social networks. There's always a new online platform. Are you on TikTok? Are you on Facebook? Are you on Twitch? Are you on Discord? There are too many things. Where is your community? Be where your people are, or where are the people you're called to reach? Be where they are. I like to think it's better to, why should I half-ass everything when I could full-ass one thing? Don't do everything, just do the things you're called to do, the things you need to do. So don't feel the pressure to do all the things. There's always another thing out there on the internet. But what are the things that you are called to do? Do them with excellence, do them with intentionality. Second, authenticity will always be more important than production value. So be authentically you in those online spaces that you are called to be present in. Don't focus on making it, like production value is nice. Well, good lighting, a nice camera, great. But being authentically you is always going to be more important, and people will connect with you, because the purpose of these online spaces has always been for people to connect with people. And lastly, and perhaps most importantly, when we're doing these online services, hybrid services, eye contact is very small, but I think it's an incredibly significant detail. This is incredibly important. We've experienced it in these Zoom calls when I can look directly into the camera, directly into your eyes. In our online worship services, if you've had any sort of a Zoom service, you know the experience of feeling like you're looking directly at the person talking. But then once we set up our hybrid service where there's a camera in the room and people in the room, well, where do you look now? How do you make sure you're intentional about looking at all of the people, which means you need to know where all of the people are. Michael hears me say it almost weekly about eye contact with the camera, because that camera represents, currently at Riverside, a majority of our congregants. Imagine if I did this entire presentation talking like this. How connected do you feel to me right now? What experience are we giving our online communities? And how can we be intentional, not just about waiting for them to come back to us, but about all the ways that we have always been called to go to them?